So this is part three, your balance. So it's the quality of adjustment of tones, value of a composition, and equality of forms and masses. So you have your symmetrical balance, so it's organized on a central axis, and then asymmetrical, so it's also an equality of forms and masses, but not with central axis and often with differences. So this is how symmetrical balance plays out, and asymmetrical balance as well. Okay, so symmetrical, so weight equally distributed on both sides of a central axis, and it's almost like a mirror-like image. And then asymmetrical, both sides of central axis not identical yet appear to have same visual weight. Okay, so your balance, this is a visual interpretation of gravity. It's a physical sense of balance play a part in one's ability to balance visual information in a composition, and visual balance instead of actual physical balance. Okay, this is more visual weight. So this is your visual balance. So you can see that how that's gravity. Is this a visual balance? It's actually, as you can see, there's a weight. So to balance composition is to distribute parts in a way that piece is not about to pull itself over. So as you can see, so this is a more visual balance. So this is actually creating more weight, and this is actually set in more into the middle. So it doesn't have this weight over here. Okay. All right. So our perception, so with visual balance, our perception of a room and its composition of elements is altered as we use it and move through our space. So whenever we see it in this plan, so a room also undergoes changes as illuminated by day and by lighting fixtures at night. So this would actually create different varieties of balance. So as this one, you have your balance. This is a symmetrical balance. Okay, so you have your balance in axis, so your horizontal balance, as you can see. So this is above a central axis. So this is the height would actually balance with the quantity and the height of the secondary object. Here it has a direct balance, and this one as well. So when you think about it, it has the same weight or element in comparison to the solid block. So same for this one as well. So this is below the central axis. So you have your vertical balance. So how it like how it visually is perceived. Your radial balance around. So it's rotating or not. It's functioning around a single axis or a single plane. So same for this one. So it's a radial balance. It's around. You have types of symmetrical balance. You have near, inverted, biaxial, and radial. So this is near symmetry. So two halves not exactly the same. So more or less when you in typical human, so you have more or less a symmetrical balance of the space. I of the space of the face. Okay. This is also visual balance. So this is your central axis. So this one is actually the same as this one. So you have compositions that would aid that as well. Same for this one. So, oh, sorry. So, okay, okay. So the same for this one. This is actually equally weighted with the other side. Yeah. Okay. And then inverted symmetry. So the use of symmetry one hand, one half inverted. Okay, something like that. So it's just basically inverted. biaxial symmetries, two axes of symmetry, vertical and horizontal. So this is where you draw a line. Okay. So this is your your horizontal and then your vertical symmetry. Same. So you have your radial symmetry. It's moving around. So it's basically around. So you have that symmetry around the central axis. So radial symmetry. So you have this center point and it's moving. You have this different weights of symmetry. So that, and then another image of symmetry around the central axis. So this is your central axis. You got this movement around. So around up to here. So there is symmetry. Local symmetry. So an example of local symmetry is to have more or less the same balance and the weight. So as you can see, so for example here in relation, so you have that local symmetry. So, and then here another one. So basically having that, so in comparison to each other. So you have your asymmetry. So it has recognized as a lack of correspondence in size, shape, color, or relative position among the elements of the composition. So it doesn't actually have the same, let's say, elements or weight of general weight of the elements, but it creates a balance with regards to your optical elements. So it takes account the visual weight or shape or force onto each composition or the elements. So these elements are as stated here. So these elements are visually forceful and attract our attention. So unusual shapes, bright colors, dark values, and variegated textures create this counterbalance by less forceful elements. So this is very prominent in interior design when you're trying to create asymmetrical formations. Also in architecture, that you want to create the level of asymmetry in a space but still creates the balance that it is generally closely knit or closely related. So with this one, you have a larger scale, but you have a darker value. So this one example, you have the general size and shape, but you have the unusual shape that actually gathers or actually captures your attention. And then you have this the same weight, and you have variegated texture. So it would actually create even though it's a smaller scale, but it directly catches your attention compared to that of the larger scale composition. So asymmetry. So you have this design. So it means it doesn't really relay, but it has a weighted balance. So you have the weight and the color of the space in relation to this, even to have this grandeur of a scale here, but it's very carefully laid out to be plain. So with this, it is very typical in interior. So you want to balance the visual weight of this composition here. So you balance it with a more visual approach here and very simplified um, simplified composition there or simplified element. So basically you have this weight because of the image and then the verticality. So it would actually have, so it doesn't necessarily have the same composition or objects, but it has the weight. So as you can see, the visual on this image would actually take up the whole feeling of this wall. Okay. um, this is actually a constant challenge with designers, especially young designers, is to create the openness to play around with a symmetrical balance, since it feels more active and not so rigid in space. So especially for planning and floor plans. So it's a good practice to hone the talent of asymmetrical balance. So this is very prevalent in uh, visual merchandise and large architectural installations, even in interior design. So this one, you have your um, visual weight here. So have this wall, but you have this pop of color and the visual weight there together with this accent. So it, although it plays around as a in within a plane or a very, let's say, like very plain nga background, but it has the visual composition that it actually is balanced. So same with this one. So you have a large grouping here, so but you have this pop of wall here and this object here. So it actually draws you in because it has a variety of composition. So in asymmetry, so there is no mirror image and there is no simple formula for achieving it. So hence it is an informal balance. So have more or less equally interesting things randomly distributed. So for example, like this. All right. So it's actually a challenge to create asymmetrical balance, but it is one way to achieve a composition that is very interesting, that is driven to catch your attention. Okay. So a small, visually interesting object can balance a much larger, less interesting object. So, for example, you have this vast space, and then there is this very monotone color gray. It's very plain, but you add an object of interesting object that creates an actual balance in the space. Okay, so to achieve visual balance, one must determine visual weight of objects. So, Rudolf Arnheim, author of Psychological Principles of Art. So, your size, your effect, larger objects appear visually heavier than smaller objects. So, shape, objects of regular shape appear heavier than irregularly shaped ones. So, that's why you have to play around with massing and scale and shape and form. Form and space, so positive forms weigh more than negative space. So a large space can be balanced against a smaller positive form. So that's why in relation to architecture and design, if you play around with a very vast space or designing a vast space, it can be balanced with smaller or positive forms. So isolation, so objects isolated in a space appear heavier than those surrounded by other elements. So when you create, for example, a vignette or something, for example, like this, so this is a majority of a vast space, but the visual, this actually creating a visual weight. So the color in contrast to the rest of the colors. So isolation. Okay. Density, so multiple small objects can balance one larger object. So as you can see, this as a reference, so I have multiple small objects which actually balance this one. Same for this one as well. So the monotony and the balance of this wider or larger object in relation to smaller objects here and the side.